I am so glad you've joined us today for another stop on our journey through the Bible. We are still in the very first book of the Bible, Genesis. And today, our story will take us to the land of Canaan with a man named Abraham and his wife Sarah. Now, after Noah and his family left the ark, the earth started filling up with people again, and they spread out all over. God had his eye on Abraham. And one day, when Abraham was 75 years old, God spoke to him and told him to pack his bags and move to a place called Canaan. God said he had really amazing plans for Abraham and his family. In fact, God wanted to bless all the families on the earth through Abraham's family. So Abraham packed up all his clothes, his household stuff, his animals, all his servants. Abraham was really wealthy and he had many things. But one thing he didn't have was children. He and his wife had been waiting so long to have kids. It would be like your grandma and grandpa still waiting to have their first baby. Abraham trusted God, so he and Sarah moved with all their stuff to a new land, where they didn't speak the language and had very different customs. But he knew God had a plan, and they waited. They waited and waited and waited, and still they had no baby. When Abraham was almost 100 years old and Sarah was 90, they were beginning to think God had forgotten about them. Late one night, God called Abraham outside and told him to count the stars in the sky. Have you ever seen the night sky full of stars? I love looking at the stars. If you're somewhere where there isn't a lot of light, it's so amazing to look at the stars. And the longer you look, the more your eyes adjust to the darkness and the more stars seem to pop out until there are so many, there is no way you can count them. There was no way Abraham could count the stars. God promised Abraham that that was how many great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren he would have. So many, he wouldn't be able to count them. Abraham believed God. But Sarah laughed. She couldn't see how it would be possible for her to have a baby. But nothing is impossible for God. And guess what happened? A year later, Sarah and Abraham had a baby boy, and they named him Isaac, which means laughter. They laughed with joy at this miracle. Have you ever waited a long time for something you really wanted? We have to practice patience, don't we? It can be so hard to wait. How did you feel when you finally got what you were waiting for? So excited? Relieved? Thankful? Now, how do you think you would feel if someone told you you had to give back what you waited for? Oh my, that would be hard. This is what happened to Abraham. When his beloved son Isaac was older, God asked Abraham for a really big sacrifice. He asked Abraham to give Isaac back. Give Isaac back to me to live with me in heaven. Abraham had waited so long for his son. He loved him so much. The Bible doesn't tell us about the conversations God and Abraham had after he asked Abraham to return Isaac. But we can imagine how confused Abraham must have been. He probably had a lot of questions for God. God isn't afraid of our questions. He knows we have them. He knows we don't always understand. He knows sometimes things he asks us to do are really, really hard. He doesn't leave us on our own. He gives us each other, and he's given us himself. Just like with Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham and Sarah, he will never, ever leave you. In Genesis 22, we learn the very next day after God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son, Abraham got up early, loaded up his donkey, and set off with Isaac to a mountain God told him to climb. Abraham and Isaac met God on the mountain. Abraham said, God, if you want my only son, here he is. God was so pleased with Abraham and how much he trusted God to give Isaac back to him, even though he didn't fully understand. God told Abraham he did not need to give up his son. Instead, God gave Abraham a sheep to be the sacrifice. God blessed Abraham for his great trust. Abraham was called God's friend. Our verse this week is in James 2:23. So in this way, the scripture was fulfilled because Abraham believed God. His faith was exchanged for God's righteousness. So he became known as the lover of God. All the people who came after Abraham and heard his story knew how much he loved God because Abraham believed what God said. That is what having faith means, believing God. Abraham believed him even when he didn't completely understand. Later in our journey, we're going to learn about how God gave up his one and only son, whom he loved so much, as a gift to the world. That would be Jesus, who actually was one of Abraham's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. We have a fun craft that you can do at home today to help you remember the story about Abraham and how God had him look at the stars and promised him something really big, and it seemed impossible, but with God, nothing is impossible. So if you have construction paper, you can cut out a circle. I have blue paper, but you could also use a paper plate and paint it blue. You can have fun with blue and black, making it kind of look like a night sky. So you're going to take your circle, and you're going to cut it into a spiral. So you just kind of go around and around. You just keep going around. And look, you have this fun little coil. So if you could take other colors of construction paper to cut out stars, or if you had star stickers, you could put all the stickers on your coil, and in the end it'll look like this. Put a little loop on, you can hang it, and you can hang it in your room and remember at night how God is faithful to keep his promises, and with God nothing is impossible. And don't forget to fill in your passport this week. You can put our scripture from James chapter 2, verse 23. And then I put a picture of the night sky and the stars. You could draw stars or put stickers. You can decorate it however you want. But to remember that Abraham's faith was amazing, and he was called God's friend. And all the people knew him as a lover of God because of his great faith.